The SEALs were trapped. The radio crackled with desperation. Enemy snipers had them pinned down, and no one believed anyone could reach that deadly range. The sun was dipping below the rugged Afghan mountains, casting long shadows over the dusty base. The hum of helicopters was absent, replaced by the distant echo of gunfire and frantic calls for extraction. Inside the base, Sergeant Emma Reynolds was scrubbing pots in the mess hall, the smell of stew and freshly baked bread filling the room. Most soldiers thought of her as just the cook, the woman who kept their morale high with warm meals after long, grueling days. What they didn't know was that behind her calm, steady hands was a secret skill that could change everything. The radio crackled again, sharper this time, more urgent. SEAL team trapped. Extraction needed immediately. No other pilots available. The announcement came through the command tent's loudspeakers, bouncing off the concrete walls. Emma's heart skipped. She dropped her rag, wiped her hands on her apron, and without hesitation, sprinted toward the flight line. Her mind raced, but her movements were practiced and precise. She was no ordinary cook. She was a trained pilot, though that truth had been carefully guarded. As she ran, she felt the weight of every eye turning to her. Whispers followed in her wake. "The cook's flying? Are they serious? That girl? She can't be ready." Emma ignored the doubts. There was no time for second-guessing. Lives were on the line. Her fingers trembled just slightly as she slid into the cockpit of the Black Hawk helicopter. The familiar smell of oil and metal surrounded her. She ran through her pre-flight checks silently, her breath steady. Years of flight school, countless hours of simulator training, and the pressure of the moment fused into a calm determination. The base commander's voice crackled through her headset. "Emma, you're our only chance." "Get them out." Emma nodded, though he couldn't see her. The rotors began to spin, slicing the air, stirring up dust and debris. The world outside blurred as the helicopter lifted off, climbing toward the rugged peaks where the SEALs fought for survival. The journey was tense. Enemy snipers were known to hold those mountain ridges with deadly accuracy. Every second counted. Emma's eyes scanned the horizon, searching for threats, calculating the safest path. She communicated with the trapped team, her voice calm and steady, offering a lifeline in the chaos. Inside the cockpit, the world was a mixture of flashing instrument lights and the dull roar of the rotors. Emma's focus was absolute. She adjusted the controls with precision, weaving through the jagged terrain, dodging bursts of enemy fire that kicked up clouds of dust and rock. The radio buzzed. "Emma, we see you. We're moving to the extraction point," a surge of relief mixed with renewed tension. The extraction zone was a narrow ledge barely large enough for the helicopter's skids to land. One wrong move could mean disaster, not just for the SEALs, but for Emma and her crew. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she hovered, the helicopter shaking under the pounding gunfire. The SEALs sprinted toward her, adrenaline fueling their every step. Emma's voice guided them, clear and confident. "Keep low, move fast. You're almost there." With every soldier safely aboard, Emma eased the helicopter into a climb, the blades spinning furiously as the enemy fired relentlessly. The ground fell away beneath them, danger momentarily behind. As the Black Hawk sped back toward base, the tension slowly melted into quiet. The SEAL team leader looked over at Emma with tired but grateful eyes. "We'll never forget what you did today." Emma gave a small nod, the weight of what had just happened sinking in. She wasn't just the cook anymore. She was a pilot, a rescuer, a hero in the eyes of those who mattered most. Back at the base, as the helicopter settled and the team disembarked, the whispers turned to respect. The story of the cook who flew into the heart of danger would spread, not as a surprise, but as a testament to courage, skill, and the unexpected ways heroism can appear. Emma sat back down in the mess hall later, the smell of stew once again wrapping around her, but nothing would ever be quite the same. The SEAL's words echoed in her mind. They wouldn't forget, and neither would she. Emma Reynolds wasn't always the hero who soared above enemy fire. Long before the roar of helicopter blades filled the air, she was a girl watching her father climb into his cockpit, the sunlight glinting off his Air Force jacket. He was her first hero, an Air Force pilot who had spent decades in the skies, serving with honor and precision. From the moment she could walk, Emma was captivated by planes, engines, and the endless blue beyond. But growing up as the daughter of a decorated pilot came with its own challenges. Her father, proud yet cautious, had a vision for Emma's future, one far from the danger of combat zones. "You have a choice, Emma," he said more than once. "Fly when you're ready. But remember, there are safer ways to serve." Those words echoed in her mind when she enlisted. The military didn't always give new recruits a choice in their roles, and Emma found herself assigned as a cook at a remote base in Afghanistan. It was frustrating at first. She was trained to fly, had passed every test, but here she was, peeling potatoes and boiling water. The kitchen was hot and hectic, filled with the voices of soldiers craving a taste of home, a break from the endless dust and gunfire outside. Still, Emma kept her flying skills alive in secret. When the base was quiet and the stars came out, she would stare up at the night sky and imagine herself soaring above the mountains. The world stretched out beneath her. She trained in simulators, studied maps, and stayed ready, knowing that one day she might be called upon to leave the kitchen behind. Her fellow soldiers admired her quiet strength. "Emma's got nerves of steel," one of them said. "You wouldn't guess it by how calm she is in the kitchen, but out there, she's different." Emma smiled at the compliment, but never boasted. She understood the delicate balance between being part of the support team and stepping into the front line. It was a line many women in the military walked every day, carrying the weight of expectations, stereotypes, and their own fierce determination. The base itself was a world of contrasts. Inside the mess hall, laughter and the clinking of cutlery created a rare sense of normalcy. Outside, sand and rocks stretched endlessly, broken only by watchtowers and barbed wire. Soldiers came and went, carrying stories of battles fought and friends lost. Emma's own story was still being written. Her training had been rigorous, hours of flight school, classroom drills, and physical tests. She knew how to handle the helicopter's controls like a pianist knows their keys. But the reality of war was different from anything she'd imagined. One night, during a quiet moment, Emma found herself in a conversation with Captain Harris, a pilot who had flown countless missions over Afghanistan. "You ever think about what it's like out there?" he asked. Emma nodded. "Every day. I want to be ready when my time comes." Harris looked at her with respect. "You're already ready. The skills are there. Sometimes it's about having the courage to step up when no one else can." That courage was about to be tested in a way Emma never expected. When the call came that a SEAL team was trapped and no pilots were available, it was Emma's name that came up. The cook who could fly. Back home, her father had once told her that flying wasn't just about skill, it was about heart. The moment she'd chosen to climb into the cockpit that day, she realized she had both. But the journey hadn't been easy. Emma faced doubt not only from others, but from herself. Could she live up to the legacy of her father? Could she prove that her place was not just in the kitchen, but in the skies, where danger waited on every wind? Her training had prepared her for the mechanics, but the real test was the fear, the heavy weight that pressed against her chest in moments of uncertainty. In the mess hall, Emma kept her story quiet. She was surrounded by soldiers who respected her cooking, but didn't always see the pilot beneath. That invisibility was both a shield and a burden. Her comrades had no idea how many nights she spent studying maps, running flight simulations, or practicing emergency maneuvers in her mind. Her world was divided between pots and pans and the roar of engines she longed to hear again. When the radio crackled with the call for an emergency extraction, Emma's heart hammered, but her mind was clear. She had trained for this moment, even if no one had expected her to take it. Her story wasn't just about a woman who turned from cook to pilot. It was about the countless hidden stories in the military, of women who step up quietly and bravely, ready when their moment arrives. Emma's backstory is a testament to resilience, to patience, and to the unyielding belief that courage can come from the most unexpected places. It's a reminder that every role in the military is vital, and sometimes The greatest heroes are the ones waiting in the wings. As the sun rose over the rugged landscape, Emma looked out from the base's perimeter. The same mountains where the SEALs now fought had always called to her. Today, she would answer that call. Not as a cook, but as the pilot who would bring them home. The radio crackled again, louder this time, breaking through the late afternoon calm like a jolt of electricity. SEAL team trapped. Coordinates 34.567, 69.123, extraction immediate. The words echoed across the base. The command tent erupted in activity. Phones rang, orders barked, boots pounding on gravel. But in the mess hall, Emma Reynolds was still wiping down counters, the simmering stew forgotten as the urgency seeped into her bones. Her heart raced, but her face remained steady. She had been waiting for a moment like this, though she'd never dared admit it aloud. The call wasn't for a trained combat pilot on the front lines. It was for her, the cook who could fly. The words came from the operations officer, clipped and direct. "Emma, suit up. You're the only pilot available." Emma didn't hesitate. She slipped off her apron, the fabric falling to the floor like a silent symbol of the roles she was leaving behind. Her fingers worked quickly, lacing up combat boots, pulling on flight gear, strapping on her helmet with practiced ease. Every movement was precise, rehearsed, a dance between readiness and instinct. As she moved toward the flight line, whispers chased her through the base. "The cook's flying the Black Hawk? She's crazy or brave." The doubt was palpable. Some thought she was a stunt, an emergency stopgap. Others saw in her the quiet strength they hadn't known they needed. The Black Hawk helicopter awaited, engines cold but ready. Emma climbed inside, the cockpit familiar yet daunting. She flipped switches, ran through checklists, her mind racing through emergency protocols. The weight of responsibility pressed on her, heavier than any gear strapped to her body. Her fingers gripped the controls. The rotors began to hum, then roar, slicing the dusty air as the helicopter lifted off. The base shrank beneath her as she climbed into the sky, the vast Afghan landscape stretching endlessly ahead. Every shadow could hide danger. Every gust of wind could shift the mission's outcome. Radio chatter buzzed in her ear. "Emma, do you copy? We're moving to Extraction Point Delta." The SEAL team's voices were tense but hopeful. She answered, steady and clear. "Copy that. Hold tight. I'm coming for you." Flying into hostile territory was like threading a needle through a storm. Enemy snipers watched from jagged ridges, their scopes trained on the tiny, vulnerable helicopter. The first bullet pinged off the armor. Emma's heart hammered, but her hands were steady. She banked left, weaving between rocky outcrops, calculating every move with ruthless precision. She adjusted altitude, skimming treetops and using the natural cover to shield her approach. Her eyes darted between the instruments and the rugged terrain, scanning for any sign of enemy movement. The wind howled through the open cockpit, a constant reminder that one mistake could be fatal. Behind her, the SEAL team was making their way across the rough ground, racing against time and bullets. Emma's radio crackled again. "We're 5 clicks out, heavy fire. Need you to hover on the ridge edge." Emma's breath caught. The extraction point was a narrow ledge, barely large enough to set down. She eased the Black Hawk into position, every inch a test of nerve and skill. The helicopter shuddered as gunfire peppered the side. Dust and debris swirled, blurring the world outside the cockpit. The soldiers sprinted, diving onto the skid as bullets zipped past. Emma's voice cut through the chaos, calm and commanding. "Keep low! Get inside now!" The helicopter rocked violently as the enemy intensified their assault. Emma gritted her teeth, fighting to maintain control. Her years of training took over. She countered every jolt, every shudder, guiding the aircraft away from danger. The last soldier climbed aboard, the door closing just as a rocket exploded nearby. The blast rocked the helicopter, but Emma held steady. The rotors screamed as she pulled up and banked away from the ridge, the enemy's fire trailing behind them. As they gained altitude, the tension slowly eased. The SEAL team leader glanced at Emma, eyes filled with a mix of exhaustion and gratitude. "You saved us all," he said quietly. "We owe you everything." Emma nodded, her own relief tempered by the weight of what they had escaped. The mission wasn't over. They still had to make it back through enemy territory, but for this moment, they were alive. Back at base, the helicopter touched down with a heavy thud. Soldiers rushed to debrief, but Emma simply removed her helmet and leaned back, the adrenaline draining away. The mess hall awaited, her other world, but for now she was something more. Word spread quickly through the base. The cook who had flown into a firefight and brought the SEALs home was no longer just a support soldier. She was a pilot, a rescuer, a symbol of unexpected courage. Emma knew this mission would change everything, not just for her, but for every soldier who believed that heroes only came from the front lines. Sometimes the bravest act was answering the call when no one else could. Enemy fire lit up the valley like angry fireflies. Bullets zipped past the Black Hawk as Emma Reynolds gripped the controls, her knuckles white but steady. The sun was a harsh glare behind her, the rugged Afghan mountains stretching endlessly ahead. Every movement mattered. Every decision could mean life or death for the men clinging to survival below. The extraction point was barely visible, a jagged outcrop of rock where the SEAL team had made their last stand. The air smelled of dust, gunpowder, and sweat. Emma's mind raced through calculations, wind speeds, enemy positions. The helicopter's engines roared, drowning out the chaos but unable to drown out the pounding in her chest. Enemy snipers had zeroed in on the ridge. Their shots kicked up dust clouds mere meters from the helicopter's skids. The Black Hawk shook violently with every near miss, but Emma's hands remained sure. She adjusted the collective, easing the chopper closer, hovering just above the rocky ledge. "Hold steady," she murmured to herself, eyes locked on the fragile ground below. The SEALs scrambled toward the helicopter, their movements quick and precise despite exhaustion and fear. "Almost there," came the crackled voice of the team leader through the radio. "We're counting on you, Emma." The first soldier leapt aboard, followed by the others, a blur of movement against the rising dust. Bullets whipped past, striking the helicopter's hull with metallic thuds. Emma's muscles tensed as the aircraft rocked under fire. She kept her focus razor-sharp, fighting the urge to panic. A sudden explosion nearby shook the helicopter violently. Emma felt the blast ripple through the cabin, but her grip never faltered. "Everyone stay low," she ordered calmly, voice steady despite the chaos. The last SEAL was just on the skid when another round struck the helicopter's side, sending a jarring shudder through the frame. Emma adjusted the cyclic, lifting the Black Hawk away from danger, blades slicing through the dusty air as enemy fire continued to rain down. The helicopter climbed rapidly, leaving the burning ridge behind. Below, the landscape was a patchwork of shadows and light, mountains and valleys stretching toward the horizon. The rescue had succeeded, but the mission wasn't over yet. Inside the cockpit, the atmosphere was tense but controlled. Emma's face was set, brows furrowed as she kept the helicopter steady while the SEALs caught their breath. The team leader gave a quick status report, voices still tense but relieved. "We're hit but intact. Good flying, Emma. You saved us." Emma nodded without a word, eyes scanning the horizon for threats. Every second still counted. The enemy could strike again at any moment. The radio buzzed with incoming updates, reports of enemy patrols moving toward their route, warnings to remain vigilant. Emma's mind raced, plotting the safest path back to base. She had to balance speed with caution, keeping the helicopter stable despite the heavy load and the risk lurking around every bend. The landscape seemed endless, a harsh and unforgiving environment where survival depended on skill and split-second decisions. Emma felt the weight of responsibility settle even deeper. These men trusted her with their lives, and she couldn't afford to fail. Suddenly, a sharp warning tone sounded from the cockpit instruments. An enemy missile locked onto the helicopter. Emma's heart leapt. Years of training surged to the surface as she executed evasive maneuvers, banking hard and diving low to throw off the lock. The terrain rushed past in a blur of rock and dust as she guided the Black Hawk through a narrow canyon, shaking off the deadly threat. The missile alarm silenced, replaced by a heavy silence. Emma exhaled slowly, muscles relaxing just a fraction. The adrenaline remained, but she had bought them precious time. The SEAL team exchanged looks of gratitude and awe. They had seen many pilots in their time, but none who flew with this mix of calm and courage. Emma wasn't just a cook-turned-pilot. She was a force they would never forget. As the helicopter cleared the danger zone, the setting sun painted the sky in fiery hues. Emma glanced at her instruments, then back out the window. The base was still miles away, but hope was growing with every turn of the rotors. The mountains gradually gave way to the flat expanse of the base perimeter. The protective walls and watchtowers came into view, promising safety after the long ordeal. Emma radioed in. Approaching base. "Prepare for landing." Her voice was steady, but inside she felt a deep exhaustion begin to settle. The mission had tested every ounce of her training and willpower. The helicopter descended carefully, landing with a firm thud on the dust-covered tarmac. The ramp lowered, and the SEALs quickly disembarked, their faces tired but alive. They turned to Emma, gratitude and respect shining in their eyes. "You did more than fly today," the team leader said quietly. "You brought us home," Emma smiled, a quiet pride warming her chest. The line between cook and pilot had vanished in those intense moments. She had proven that courage and skill weren't defined by titles or assignments, but by the willingness to step up when it mattered most. As the base settled back into its routine, Emma's story began to spread, not as a surprise, but as a symbol of resilience, determination, and unexpected heroism. The woman who had once been just a cook had become a legend among the soldiers who owed her their lives. And for Emma Reynolds, that was just the beginning. The air inside the base was thick with tension and relief. Soldiers moved through their routines, but the story of Emma Reynolds' daring rescue had already begun to ripple through the camp like wildfire. The mess hall, once just a place for nourishment and quiet respite, now buzzed with quiet conversations filled with awe and admiration. Emma sat quietly in a corner, her flight gear still on, her hands resting on the worn table. Around her, glances of respect replaced the earlier skepticism. The cook who flew into enemy fire had transformed in the eyes of her comrades, and in her own mind, she was beginning to see herself differently too. The base commander approached. A tall, stern man with a voice that could command a room without raising it. "Sergeant Reynolds," he said, his tone measured but warm, "the higher-ups want to see you. Your actions today have not gone unnoticed." Emma nodded, standing up, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. She walked toward the command tent, heart steady but mind swirling with anticipation. What would this mean? Recognition? Promotion? Or simply acknowledgement of a dangerous gamble that had paid off? Inside the tent, the senior officers gathered around a large table littered with maps and reports. Their faces were serious, but held a trace of admiration as Emma entered. The commanding officer, a general with silver hair and sharp eyes, gestured for her to sit. "Sergeant Reynolds," he began, "your quick thinking and piloting skills saved an entire SEAL team today. That kind of courage under fire is rare." Emma listened, the gravity of his words sinking in. This was more than a thank you. It was an acknowledgement of her place in the military's unfolding story. "We want to offer you a position in our flight unit," the general continued. "You've proven you're more than capable. There's a future here, if you want it." For a moment, Emma's thoughts drifted back to the kitchen, to the simmering pots and the soldiers waiting for a warm meal. But the truth was undeniable. The cockpit was where she belonged. "I'm ready," she said simply. The days that followed were a whirlwind of change. Emma traded the mess hall for the flight line, her mornings now filled with pre-flight checks, mission briefings, and intensive training exercises. The transition wasn't without challenges. Some pilots eyed her warily, their skepticism a quiet test she had to overcome every day. But Emma let her skills speak louder than words. Every flight was a statement. Her precision, her calm under pressure, her unyielding determination. Slowly, the doubts began to fade. She earned nods of approval from seasoned pilots and respect from the soldiers who relied on her. One evening, after a grueling day of flight drills, Emma found herself standing outside the base perimeter, gazing at the stars. The weight of her journey settled around her like a cloak. From the daughter of a pilot to a cook, and now a frontline aviator, it was a path forged through perseverance and quiet strength. Her phone buzzed. A message from her father. "Proud of you, Emma. Keep flying high." She smiled, a mix of warmth and resolve filling her chest. But military life was never without sacrifice. Late one night, an urgent call shattered the quiet. The base was to send a rescue mission to aid a convoy trapped in hostile territory. Emma was assigned as the lead pilot. The stakes were high, the risks immense. As the Black Hawk lifted into the darkened sky, Emma felt the familiar surge of adrenaline and responsibility. The world below was cloaked in shadows, danger lurking at every turn. Her hands moved instinctively over the controls, the helicopter slicing through the night air toward the unknown. The mission was intense. Enemy fire greeted them as they approached the convoy's location. Emma's training and experience converged in perfect harmony as she navigated the helicopter through narrow valleys and rocky passes. The cargo was fragile, supplies vital for survival. Failure was not an option. Amid the chaos, Emma spotted movement, a hidden sniper aiming at the helicopter's vulnerable side. Without hesitation, she banked hard, throwing the enemy's aim off, then lined up for a precise landing near the convoy. The ground crew moved quickly to secure the supplies as Emma hovered, eyes sharp for any threats. Every second was a battle between hope and danger. When the mission was complete and the convoy was safely on its way, Emma allowed herself a brief moment of relief. The radio buzzed with gratitude from the ground teams. She was not just flying machines. She was carrying lives, hope, and the fragile thread between survival and defeat. Back at the base, Emma's reputation continued to grow. She was no longer just the cook who flew. She was a pilot, a protector, a symbol of courage and resilience. But beneath the medals and missions was a woman who never forgot where she started. The kitchen, the mess hall, the quiet moments of doubt and determination. Emma Reynolds had become more than a story of heroism. She was a living testament to the idea that courage can come from the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the greatest battles are won not just in the skies, but within ourselves. The days that followed the convoy rescue were a blur of briefings, training and quiet reflection for Emma Reynolds. The base was no longer just a place to pass time. It had become the stage for her transformation. Every mission she flew, every challenge she faced, chipped away at the doubts that once shadowed her mind. But military life, especially in a war zone, is never just about the mission. It's about the sacrifices, the unseen battles, and the relationships forged under fire. Emma found herself navigating these complexities with the same quiet strength that had carried her through the cockpit's turbulence. Late one evening, after a long day of debriefs and maintenance, Emma sat alone on the base's observation deck. The desert sky stretched wide above her, a canvas of stars shimmering against the blackness. The quiet was broken only by distant voices and the soft hum of machinery. Her thoughts drifted back to home, to her father, to the kitchen she once ruled, and to the soldiers whose lives now depended on her flying. The burden was heavy, but so was the pride. She had stepped into a role few believed she could fill, and every day she proved them wrong. The memory of that first extraction mission, the bullets, the explosions, the faces of the SEAL team played in her mind like a film reel. She remembered the adrenaline, the fear, and the overwhelming sense of responsibility that had settled in her chest. That mission had been a turning point, not just for her career, but for who she was. Her radio crackled, pulling her back to the present. Sergeant Reynolds, new orders coming in. Meeting in the operations tent in 15 minutes. The voice was brisk, professional. Emma nodded to herself, standing up and heading toward the command center. Inside the tent, maps and digital displays flickered with information about a high-stakes covert operation. Intelligence had pinpointed a high-value target in a hostile region, and the mission required precision, stealth, and unwavering nerves. Emma was briefed as the lead pilot for the insertion team, an elite group of special forces who would rely on her skill to get them in and out safely. The gravity of the assignment was clear. Failure wasn't an option. Emma felt the familiar knot in her stomach, but steadied herself with the knowledge that every challenge had been preparing her for this moment. Night fell, and the base became a hive of quiet activity. The Black Hawk was prepped and waiting, engines silent but ready. Emma sat in the cockpit, running through her checklist with meticulous focus. The weight of the mission pressed down on her, but her hands were steady, her mind sharp. As the helicopter lifted off into the inky darkness, the world below faded away, replaced by the hum of the rotors and the cold rush of night air. The team's voices were calm but tense over the radio, each member locked in their own preparation for what lay ahead. Flying low to avoid radar detection, Emma guided the helicopter through narrow canyons and shadowed valleys. The landscape was unfamiliar, unforgiving. Every moment demanded split-second decisions and absolute trust in her instincts. Suddenly, a distant flash lit up the horizon, a missile launch aimed at their flight path. Emma's heart leapt. Years of training kicked in as she executed evasive maneuvers, banking hard and diving through a maze of rocky outcrops to shake the incoming threat. The missile passed harmlessly behind the helicopter, but the close call left no room for complacency. Minutes later, they reached the insertion point. Emma hovered silently above a clearing as the special forces deployed via fast rope, their movements swift and practiced. The mission was underway. She remained on station, scanning the perimeter with sharp eyes, ready to react at a moment's notice. The tension was palpable. Time seemed to stretch and contract with every passing second. Suddenly, the radio erupted with urgent calls. The team was under heavy fire, extraction compromised. Emma's pulse quickened, but her voice was steady. "Hold your position. I'm coming in." The helicopter descended rapidly, blades cutting through the night as Emma maneuvered into the thick of the battle. Enemy tracers zipped past, and the Black Hawk shuddered under fire. But Emma's focus never wavered. She fought against the chaos, keeping the aircraft steady enough for the team to board. One by one, the soldiers climbed aboard, their faces grim but determined. The last man was just inside when a rocket exploded nearby, rocking the helicopter violently. Emma countered the blast's impact, lifting the chopper sharply and banking away from the firefight. As they soared back toward the base, the adrenaline slowly ebbed, replaced by a deep, exhausting relief. The mission had been a success, but the cost weighed heavily on everyone's minds. Back on the ground, Emma was greeted with nods of respect and quiet thanks. The men she had saved saw her not just as a pilot, but as a guardian, someone who faced the same dangers and refused to falter. That night, as she lay in her bunk, Emma reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the kitchen to the cockpit, from doubt to respect, she had carved out a place where skill and heart met. She knew there would be more missions, more risks, and more moments that tested her courage. But Emma Reynolds was ready, because she had learned that being a hero wasn't about titles or expectations. It was about showing up every time, when it mattered most. The days after the covert extraction mission blurred into a rhythm of briefings, maintenance checks, and restless nights. Emma Reynolds had earned her place among the pilots and soldiers alike, but the war zone offered no rest. Each sunrise brought new challenges and new dangers. One morning, as the sun rose red over the jagged mountains, Emma found herself reviewing the latest intelligence reports in the flight operations room. A new assignment was already waiting, an urgent call to support a reconnaissance team deep behind enemy lines. The mission was critical: gather information on insurgent movements threatening an Allied outpost. Time was short, and precision was everything. Emma's heart tightened as she studied the maps. The terrain was hostile, rugged, unforgiving, and riddled with enemy patrols. The insertion point was a small clearing surrounded by dense trees and rocky cliffs. Flying low would be essential, but the risk of detection was high. The team briefing was intense. Command emphasized the importance of stealth and speed. Emma listened closely, absorbing every detail. Her role was clear: fly the helicopter in silently, keep the team safe, and extract them swiftly once their task was complete. As night fell, the base buzzed with focused energy. The helicopter stood ready on the tarmac, its dark silhouette outlined against the star-streaked sky. Emma sat in the cockpit, her eyes tracing the horizon as the rotors began to spin. The familiar roar filled the air, a powerful reminder of the responsibility she carried. They lifted off smoothly, the Black Hawk gliding silently toward the shadows. Emma navigated the maze of canyons with practiced ease, the ground rushing beneath her like a dark river. Her hands moved with precision, every control input a lifeline for the team depending on her. Suddenly, a sharp warning blared from the aircraft's sensors, a heat signature locking onto them. An enemy missile. Emma's body tensed. Without hesitation, she banked hard, diving into a narrow gorge to evade the incoming threat. The missile exploded harmlessly behind them, sending a shockwave through the air. Missile evaded. Continuing approach, Emma reported calmly. The helicopter crept closer to the landing zone, shrouded in night and silence. Emma's breath slowed as she hovered above the clearing. The team deployed quickly, ropes unspooling into the darkness as soldiers touched down like ghosts. She remained vigilant, scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. Minutes passed like hours. The radio buzzed with intermittent updates from the reconnaissance team, their voices tense but steady. Then suddenly chaos erupted. Enemy patrols had spotted the team, and gunfire shattered the night. Emma's pulse surged. Without hesitation, she maneuvered the helicopter to provide cover, shining the aircraft's powerful spotlight onto the battlefield. Bullets ricocheted off the helicopter's hull, and explosions lit up the trees around them. Emma's hands flew over the controls, dodging, weaving, keeping the aircraft stable despite the relentless assault. "Get the team out now!" came the urgent call from the radio. Emma didn't hesitate. She dropped the helicopter down as close as she dared, the rotors stirring up leaves and dust. The team scrambled aboard, faces set with grim determination and exhaustion. Just as the last soldier climbed inside, a grenade detonated nearby, shaking the Black Hawk violently. Emma fought the controls, pulling the helicopter up and away from the blast radius. The enemy fire followed them, tracer rounds streaking through the air, but Emma's skill kept them just out of reach. She banked sharply over the treetops, the base lights growing brighter ahead like a beacon of safety. Back on the ground, the soldiers erupted in quiet cheers, their gratitude unspoken but palpable. Emma's reputation as a pilot who could turn the tide had solidified even further. But the victory was bittersweet. Emma couldn't shake the weight of the close calls, the lives saved, and those lost in battles she hadn't been part of. The war was a complex tapestry of sacrifice and survival, and she was woven deeply into its fabric. That night, as she sat alone beneath the stars, Emma allowed herself a moment to reflect. The journey from cook to pilot had been unexpected, filled with moments of doubt, courage, and unrelenting resolve. She had crossed lines many thought she never could, and in doing so, had discovered the strength she never knew she had. Her phone buzzed softly, a message from a fellow pilot. A simple, "We're proud of you." Emma smiled, the words a balm for the long days ahead. She knew the battles would continue and the risks would never fully disappear. But she was ready, because Emma Reynolds was no longer just a cook or a pilot. She was a symbol, a testament to the power of resilience, the courage to rise above, and the unbreakable bond between those who fight together. And as the base settled into a quiet night, Emma prepared herself for whatever the dawn would bring. The day of the ceremony dawned with a sky so clear it seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. The entire base was gathered, soldiers standing at attention, faces serious but shining with pride. Emma Reynolds stood among them, no longer just the cook who had once quietly prepared meals, but a pilot whose name had become synonymous with courage and resilience. She could feel the weight of every eye upon her, the respect, the gratitude, the recognition that had been hard-earned through long nights and dangerous missions. The base commander stepped forward, his voice steady and clear as he addressed the crowd. "Today we honor Sergeant Emma Reynolds. From humble beginnings in the mess hall to the skies over hostile terrain, she has shown us what true dedication and bravery mean." Emma's heart pounded as the general approached, holding a medal that gleamed under the bright sun, the Navy Cross, one of the highest honors for valor. The words that followed were heavy with meaning. Sergeant Reynolds, your actions have saved lives, inspired your comrades, and upheld the very best traditions of our service. It is my privilege to award you this medal. As the medal was pinned to her uniform, Emma's mind flashed back over the journey, the first flight, the convoys under fire, the night missions where every second counted, the faces of the soldiers she had saved, the friends she had made, and the sacrifices they all shared. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, but she held them back. This moment was not just hers. It belonged to every person who had believed in her when the odds were stacked high. After the ceremony, Emma found a quiet spot near the base flagpole. The American flag fluttered gently in the breeze, a symbol of everything she fought for. She thought about her father and the kitchen where her story had begun. A fellow pilot approached, breaking the silence. "You did more than fly today, Emma. You showed us what it means to be a hero." Emma nodded, her voice steady. "It's not about being a hero. It's about doing what needs to be done, no matter where you start." The days that followed brought new challenges, but the medal was a reminder, proof that courage, determination, and heart could change the course of a life. Emma was no longer just a story whispered in the mess hall. She was a symbol of hope, a beacon for those who dared to dream beyond their circumstances. In quiet moments, Emma still thought about the SEALs who had first inspired her. Their respect, earned through fire and trust, was a bond she carried like a second skin. Her journey had come full circle, but the future was wide open. She knew there would be more missions, more risks, and more battles yet to face. But Emma Reynolds was ready, because she had learned the most important lesson of all. True strength isn't about where you begin. It's about the courage to take flight when the moment calls. And as the sun set over the base, casting long shadows across the desert, Emma looked to the horizon with steady eyes, prepared to face whatever came next.